Okay, guys, welcome back to the Noob DM channel, Ariel's Noob DM channel. I have not really dropped a video in a while, and I apologize being a couple of days late. I was going to do it on Saturday over the weekend, but some things technical issues got in the way. Um, uh, I thought for today's offering, I've seen this done in other websites and other places, and I thought I could add my own convictions and my own opinions about this. And I want to talk about the published settings that Wizards of the Coast, the setting books that have been published by Wizards of the Coast for fifth edition primarily, because in a couple of days, 6 days really, on the 16th, today's August 10th, and on the 16th of this month, we are just a few days away from the release of the new Spelljammer setting book, a series of books, packet of books. And when I first heard about Spelljammer coming in, Spelljammer is an old, for all those of you that don't know, it's an older um, setting from, I think, second edition is when they first popped out. And it's sort of described as Dungeons and Dragons in space, but there's a lot more to it than that. It's actually traversing and traveling through the different planes of existence, the astral plane and other planes. I don't really know how it works, to be honest, because I it's not my cup of tea, and I'm not all that huge into like spacefaring fantasy tropes. So Spelljammer was never like my favorite setting, but I know a lot of people still, because of nostalgia primarily, they played second edition, and that's one setting that has been uh, heavily requested by the D&D community, and uh, Wizards of the Coast is finally gonna drop that. So I thought about um, the actual setting. They're doing this thing where they have three books at once. One of them is like a setting book, the other one's an adventure, and the other one's like a bestiary with all the monsters. And I thought about picking it up because it's kind of cheap online. If you go out to the retail store and buy it like a hobby store, like where I usually get my books, you pay a little bit more. But if you get it online right now, they're having all kind. I think they're still running specials on it where you can pre-order it, and you don't even have to go. It'll come to your door, and it's something like $40 plus tax. I've seen it as low as 40 in some places, which is a lot for three source books. You know that normally that would run you like three times as much. Um, but I don't know. I'm not sure that I would ever play it. I mean, I would play it, but I wouldn't necessarily run adventures. It's kind of the same thing, the same problem I have deciding whether to pick up the new adventure book, which is the eh, journeys into the Citadel, Journeys into the Radiant Citadel, and I want to support that book because it's written by people of color, and I know that kind of triggers some people. They're like, "Oh, I don't care about diversity. I just care about the adventure itself. If they're any good." I heard that from all the critics and all the people that have picked up the book. I heard they're pretty good, pretty interesting addition to Dungeons and Dragons. Something other than the normal um, Western civilization, Greek mythology type setting, or more traditional setting. You know what I'm talking about. Um, these are based on real world settings. So the not Spelljammer. I'm talking about the Radiant Citadel book. But at any rate, I'm ranking these in order of the only caveat to this will be that I'm not including one uh, setting book which is highly specialized, came out in the early part. I think it was 2016, 17. I can't remember, but it is the Acquisitions Incorporated book, and that's such a niche book. I don't know anybody that's used it or in my groups that have played it. I've seen it at the store, but it was based on a popular, um, which is still popular, I think, Stream, like a Penny Arcade or one of those type of deals. But unless you're a hardcore fan of the genre, or of the podcast, because the setting is supposed to be about adventure set in a corporate type setting where the joke is that it's kind of like The Office, where the bards or the different classes um, are they get they deal with payroll and they deal with more mundane type of situations. But that doesn't really appeal to me at all. So that's one book I'm skipping. But the rest of them I do have an interest in. And coming in, at, I'm going to stop rambling and I'm going to start ranking these. I'm coming in at number, I guess this would be number eight, 7 or 8. There's like, yeah, there's 8 of them now if you include the Spelljammer one, and if you don't include Acquisitions, which I don't. So this is number 8, Spelljammer Adventures in Space, and I already given my reason why I'm not super hyped about it, and that's why it kind of comes lower in my list. So stick around and until the end of the video, and if you want to find out which of the setting books that Wizards has put out is the best one or are the best ones in my opinion, then stay tuned for the rest of these rankings. All right, moving on with our list. Coming in at number 7 is the Strixhaven Curriculum of Chaos. This is the first Magic the Gathering, or the latest, also the latest Magic the Gathering offering on the list, and it comes in at the lowest because um I haven't played a lot of Magic the Gathering, and we'll talk a little bit more about Magic when we get to other entries on the list. But Strixhaven, strictly speaking, is not my favorite. Interrupted by a call, so I lost my train of thought. I apologize. But I started to say that Strixhaven is not my favorite setting. I appreciate the fact that Wizards of the Coast is interjecting or combining some interesting magic settings with Dungeons and Dragons. But to be honest, um, this has been the setting that I have been least interested in for several reasons. One is because the whole thing takes place in a University of Magic type deal. It's not really, a lot of people don't like this book because it's not really an adventure per se. It's more of a campaign setting. There is an adventure associated with it, but it's a start of more of a campaign setting because it really details the university settings, the Strixhaven, and the idea is that you pick a character and you go to classes and you do like college thing, but it's a magic program and there's professors and you take exams and you do other non-combat related things. Like for example, I read that there's a some sports athletics, so there's some skill checks involved. And even though I think it's a unique way to incorporate skill checks, which were goes all the way back to like fourth edition. I I'm not it's not my thing. I don't rule out playing it. I would definitely play this if if it was the right group. Maybe I think it's kind of intended for to bring younger players, to be honest, into the hobby, the tabletop role playing hobby. And some people don't like that because they're more traditionalist, and this is not your traditional fantasy adventure or campaign setting. This is something different that Dungeons and Dragons or Wizards of the Coast are tried in order to incorporate magic. Um, all I have to say is I don't rule out the possibility of playing it. I think that I could play it if it was in the right group and the right DM was there. I don't personally feel any need or a big, huge desire to run it. And even if I did, I would have to do a lot of work to tweak it or to give it some homebrew aspects because from what I read, little I read from this book, I don't own this. This is one of the few setting books that I don't own a physical copy. And from what I read, though, there's a lot of work that the DM has to do in terms of prep work to incorporate some of the ideas. It seems like a lot of fun, like I said, with the right group. But I went to college, and I don't really have any uh, sort of inclination to play role play, taking classes and doing that type of thing. So it's not for me, but I don't rule it out. But because of the theme, the subject matter, and there are some definitely interesting ideas and subclasses of magic that are emphasized. So I'm not gonna completely put it down. But I don't play a lot of Magic the Gathering to begin with. I think they're trying to cater to that crowd. I'm not really all that hyped about Harry Potter and wizard schools and all that stuff either. And you got gives me that kind of vibe too. So I don't hate it, but it's not my uh, something I strongly desire to play. So because of this reason, definitely not something I want to run. Like, there's other settings that I have more interest in, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But because of all those reasons, Strixhaven comes in to me um, at number 7. I think it's number 7. Yeah, number 7. All right, guys. So I'm gonna make this one short. Number 6 is Ravenloft. I had a whole diatribe about this one already, but there were some technical issues and I lost it. So I'm gonna make it kind of short since this video is gonna run long. Ravenloft comes in kind of the lower end of the scale, ranked at number 6, because I believe that even though I love um, gothic settings and horror settings and uh, yeah, vampires and all that kind of stuff, I love vampires. Strad uh, is a fabulous antagonist, and so this book, what it does is it sort of details like all the overlords, or I guess what they call them is uh, dreadlords, something like that. I can't remember, but it's not my favorite. I don't hate it. I think it's having the gothic setting and the ghosts are good, but the main problem with it is that you can it's very niche, right? You can't really take a lot of the uh the settings. It has to be in that setting of Barovia and the spooky Halloween horror type things. There are things I really do like about it is the character options, which with uh they're reborn. So it's basically you can have a character that dies and then it's reborn, kind of like a Frankenstein's monster. It has all these abilities and powers, and not necessarily like a zombie. And then you also have the one that's tied to the hags, where I think it's called the hex blood, where and if not, someone can correct me, but I think the hex blood characters have the lineage from the hags, and at some point actually turn into hags. I'm not sure, but there's a couple of good character options in there, but because it is so niche and because you can't, I mean, you could definitely take some of these character options and have them in a campaign that's not necessarily set in Ravenloft or the surrounding the areas of Ravenloft. But because it's so niche, then I can't really rank it any higher than number 6. Moving right along, guys. Coming in at number 4, it's the Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica. I know what you're thinking. Another Magic the Gathering setting for Dungeons and Dragons. Yeah, it is an adaptation of a setting that's Magic the Gathering players are going to be more familiar with. And it is the second one on our list, with Strixhaven being um, towards the bottom. This one's a little bit better, I think, because it's more inclusive and it does a really good job of setting up the mechanics and setting up the world. Ravnica, if people don't play Magic and play D&D exclusively, is more of a combination of like technology and magic. It's kind of almost like a steampunk type motif or feel to it. And this book is great because it does a good job of talking about the different factions, if you will, or the guilds. I guess it's guilds because they have different guilds that you can join, and it talks about like the different guilds that are found in the setting, and it does uh, present a few more player race sub races, but overall they're not as interesting as the ones you find in other books. I think, in my opinion, although there are some good ones, but the strong part of it is basically the attention to detail that they put into creating the adventures in the specific setting, as well as the details that they put into the different guilds. And I should go back and see
So, for example, like the Azorio Senate, and he talks about how you can create Azorio's characters, and the whole book is like that, where they have different guilds and different factions, of course, that you can become. And just typical of the 5e books is you have, you know, the backgrounds. So you can choose the personality traits and you can roll on a d8 or just choose one that you want. You don't even have to roll. And you have your ideals and bonds and flaws um, for the different uh, groups or characters. And this one also kind of borrows from a video game mechanic. I don't play Magic, so I don't know if this game mechanic is found in the Magic the Gathering, but it talks about rank and renown. And if you renown, rank and renown. So if you play MMOs or whatever, World of Warcraft or games like that, video games, MMOs. This concept should be familiar with you, where basically if you are, you join a faction, and then the more adventures and quests you complete in the name of your patron or your faction, then you get some renown and you get some rank. You go up in ranks. For example, in Warcraft, you could join the Horde. There's only two factions in the Horde and the Alliance, and you gain favor or you gain ranks as a member of each faction, depending on how well you do in completing quests, and depending on how well you do represent the faction in some of the completing objectives, fighting. There's no really. I don't think there's really PvP in Magic or in D&D unless you really want to put some in there. But normally it's more of a collective group, a collective, a cooperative. I guess that's the right term. A cooperative adventure where the dungeon master and the players kind of tell the story together. So PvP is kind of frowned upon, but that is one way you get renowned. You get some faction ranks, and you move up in the ranks in terms of in games like World of Warcraft or I don't know, like Guild Wars, like type of thing. But not here, but they do have that the concept of the ranks. And then it describes the precincts. There's various precincts and the affiliated guilds in the city. So I'm not going to spend too much time on the details, but basic, because you can sort of research it if it's appealing to you. It's not this setting is not for everybody, and the game mechanics are not for everybody. But I would say that it piqued my interest, not only because of some great artwork. As you can see, the cover is fantastic. There's a alternate cover to this as well, which is just as good. But I think that what I really like about I didn't know anything about Ravnica because I didn't play a lot of Magic the Gathering, and I think it's a good setting. And obviously, people are going to frown upon the fact that this is the second book. It's actually the second out of three books that have been put out influenced by Magic. But capitalism, right? Hasbro has to make money, and Magic is so huge right now. So why wouldn't they cross over their characters or cross over their settings into D&D? Obviously, they're going to do that, and they're going to capitalize on that. Some older players, to the chagrin are other players who are used to or want to see are excited about some of the older settings like Dark Sun and like the Spelljammer setting that we talked about earlier, or that I referenced earlier, that is going to be out in just a few days, and things like that. Dragonlance, for example. But we really haven't got those yet. So we're still patiently waiting for some of those to get rolled out. But in the meantime, I don't think it's a bad idea for Wizards of the Coast to incorporate some of the more interesting Magic the Gathering settings like Ravnica, especially when they give us new mechanics to try out, or different mechanics, I should say. I don't know if they're completely new, but like I said, the rank moving up in the guild ranks is not a new concept. It's found in other games, primarily MMOs that I've played, but incorporating those rule sets and incorporating those mechanics into D&D, I think it's a fantastic way to revitalize or to add or expand on the tabletop. So there you have it. Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica comes in as my number 4. Moving right along, we have coming in at number three, The Explorer's Guide to Wildbound. This is going to be a surprising choice to some people too, maybe a controversial choice, because it comes from the Critical Role world created by Matthew Mercer, who I think is a fantastic Dungeon Master. I'm not a huge fan of the stream. Like a lot of people are kind of crazy about it, especially on the fifth edition community. I think it's all right. But Mercer, I think, is the best part of the whole enterprise because he's just so good at creating worlds and world building. It's kind of his specialty. And the thing with Explorer's Guide to Wildmount, why it ranks so high, I think it's because, and some people may not like it, because of the fact that it features heavily features a conflict between a couple of factions again, or a couple of kingdoms. The whole idea is that it's a world embroiled in war, in conflict, and I've always kind of gravitated towards that idea. But it's just a fantastic piece of building, in my opinion. The calamity is where it all started, and it talks about like this is kind of like the incident that sort of broke the world, or sort of shattered reality when the gods were in conflict, and he talks about the calamity, and there's a divergence between races, so they talk about the post-divergence and pre-divergent era, and it's really interesting to me. There's a lot of political type intrigue, so it's not just your regular campaign book setting where you have, okay, this is the world, and you go out and explore this, and you fight the X number of goblins, and then you fight this, and then you get treasure. There's way more to it than that, and I really appreciate. You can tell how much time they spent on this material, and they do have familiar creatures from other settings on Dungeons and Dragons, like the Arakor the Arak I can't say that, but those are Arakokra, the bird-like creatures that you find in the player's handbook and in the monster manual, I think is where they are, and other setting books too. But they are specific to Sorsas. So just like the Sword Coast Adventures Guide, this book kind of breaks down how the specific races would add, or would act, or would be role played, or the specifics of the race to the setting is what I'm trying to say. So here we have the Furbolgs, which people are familiar with. Again, there are some Dragonborn but the Dragonborn in the setting and the Duedalian Empire are much different than in like Faerun, for example. Wildmount, the book says Wildmount was the cradle from which all Dragonborn civilization grew. The city-state of Draconia rose in the Dreamoth Ravine along the southern edge of the continent. And then he talks about, how the Dragonborns grew out of that. And so you have your basic fantasy creatures like the gnomes and the elves and all that. But you also have new ones like the turtles, which are like pretty interesting. And you have there's a by now this book's been out for a while, so people know what turtles are. But Hollow One, so it details the new races, or they were new at one point. Now they're, like I said, they're more familiar. Like I think this book has Tabaxi, which are and it has subclasses though. Like the Hollow One is a subclass, and you have which is, I think, a paladin or fighter one. There's the wizard subclasses, and they detailed what those are like. And it has their own system of magic, which is called the chronergy magic, and so it details spells that are correspondent with that specific magic setting, which is different than the default setting. Other like Forgotten Realms or some other setting that you might be familiar with. Of course, you have the tables detailing the backgrounds with you can roll up for your flaws, your character flaws, and all that stuff, just like the player's handbook and like the other books we looked at. And it has some great maps. There's so many maps that it's crazy how they, and this is just like a small, I'm showing you a small portion of the huge world that has been created by Matt Mercer for his critical role campaigns that are so prevalent and popular now and have been for quite a few years. I guess we should be thankful to streams like that for bringing more people into the hobby. And here is like more of detail of like an indoor map. Just showing snippets, but this book is so detailed and it is so well put together. It's really worth the money. I think as soon as I saw it, I kind of leafed through it at the bookstore, at the game store, and I was like, I'm gonna pick this up because I'm not a huge, as I said, I'm Critical Role's not my bag of tea, or my cup of tea rather, but I have watched some parts of the first campaign, and I might probably watch the whole thing because it is an interesting stream. But mostly because of Matt Mercer. I really like the way he rolls with the punches. I really like his DM style, and I definitely like the way he's put together this Wild Mount universe or setting. I don't know if I'll ever get a chance to run it. The thing is, I don't know if I'll run campaigns in a lot of these settings because the Forgotten Realms being so default, a lot of the pre-written adventures that you can just either run as a full campaign or just take parts of it and customize it and make it part of your homebrew. Those type of things are mostly set in the Sword Coast, unfortunately. But there are some alterations that you can make for settings. Wildmount is kind of a radical departure because it's so different than anything else that's come before it or after. But at any rate, hopefully I'll get to run it maybe online at some point. But it is my number 3.
All right, guys, we are moving quickly through the list, and now we are at number 2 with yet another Magic the Gathering setting. Magic the Gathering is a pretty popular setting, but I have to say that out of all the um, all the settings that Wizards of the Coast has put out, my favorite one is the Mythic Odysseys of Theros, and this book is all about the gods, basically. It talks about the different pantheons. It's very, as you can probably tell through this digital flip through that I'm going through, is very heavily influenced by like Greek mythology. So if you like, Zeus and the gods and different pantheons to use in your game, Theros is a lot like that. It does have different character options, of course, and so you can play some monster races. I had a somebody request to play a satyr in the latest campaign I'm running at the local library on Saturdays, and she wanted to play a satyr, but you can play the stat. It's right here. You can see the what it looks like, um, and you know some of this satyr attributes. You can play a minotaur, so it's very uh, uh, Greek mythology or mythological worlds. There are the Tritons, which are like a seafaring classes, and it does have you can play a minotaur, like I said, and it does have various the various gods of Theros, which are reminiscent of the gods that we're familiar with, although they have their own gods and their own mythologies, like Erebus and Heliod. You can see there. The art is not my favorite. I mean, there's some good art pieces in here, but I've seen better artwork in other D&D setting books. Um, that one's pretty cool. The Mythos of Keranos. So this book, it gives me a lot of vibes uh, to the old first edition books, like the deity. I'm thinking specifically of deities and demigods. So even if you don't want to run a campaign setting or an adventure in this type of setting, you can steal or take or what's the right word? Kind of like plunder, I guess, this information on this book and translate or transpose
some of the character options into any campaign that has to do with the presence of the gods. You know, when you get D&D fifth edition characters that are have kind of like superhero type powers in the like 15, 17, 20th level character, they can go up against some of these more formidable uh, gods, not necessarily as always as foes, but it does have some interesting role playing possibilities, I guess. So that's why I like it. I like it way more than Strixhaven and way more than, well, a little bit more than Ravnica. So I think that's why this one makes it so high on the list. I give it the number two spot. So there you have it, guys. Eberron rising from the last war. Eberron comes in at the number one setting of all the D&D settings that at least in my opinion, that Wizard has put out for 5e, and we're getting more. Like I said, we're anticipating a couple of days to get Spelljammer and Dragonlance, which is actually my one of my top settings for D&D. It hasn't come out, but they scheduled it or they announced it for schedule later this year or early next year at the latest. There was a bit of a legal problem with the creators, and all that has been hashed away. So I'm looking forward to Dragonlance joining our settings. So I hope you enjoyed this list, giving you some reasons why I think that um, these settings belong where they belong, and uh, I'm not. We'll revisit these after some of the new ones have been put out, and I get a chance to get my hands on them and play with them and to play test them, and then maybe some of these rankings will change. But as of today, these are my top settings for my top D&D 5e settings from Wizards of the Coast. So take care. And if you like this type of content, go ahead and hit the like or subscribe so that you can support the channel. And until then, uh, may the rolls be with you.